guys, welcome back to another episode of the cycle cart build, and today we're making the dashboard former. First I'm using this chipboard as a buck for bending the metal former around, and I need to cut it out with a jigsaw. Now that I have my wooden buck cut out, we've drilled some holes in and we've clamped one edge of the metal on, and now we're going to bend it around the outside edge, clamping as we go. As we bend it around, we are moving the F clamps to compress where any gaps are showing, and so far it is going quite well. We've just taken the first clamp off this edge and given it as a straight edge, it has stayed put.
One eternity later.
We're back in the workshop in lockdown, working on the cycle cart, and we're working on the main former, which is going to be the dashboard former on the cycle cart on the Delage. And to help us bend this 30 by 3mm mild steel, we've created a jig here which attaches to a vise, and it uses some ball bearings here and a bending piece from a metal bending set with a screwed on handle, and as this moves in and out, you put your piece of metal in there and you roll it back and forth, and it gives you some nice smooth curves, which has helped us create this. To attach these two formers, which are only 15 centimeters apart from each other, they will be welded to this bit of angle iron, which will then bolt onto the chassis. But so that the bodywork will sit flush with the outside of this needs to be 1.5mm in from there, and it currently just overhangs the edge. But with an angle grinder, I could just take the edge off of that like this, and that gets the perfect distance. Using the correct length and angles at the bottom of this former, we've welded it to the angle iron, which is just clamped to the chassis, and we've just re-clamped in the former that we've been using to shape it, so that we know it's in all the right place as we make the little gussets which will go across there. The former has been welded to the angle iron, and the angle iron has been drilled and bolted to the chassis with smaller temporary bolts. They will be larger, but it is looking rather neat. The other former here will be also welded onto the same bit of angle iron here, and we'll have some strengthening between them across it, and that will be the main bulkhead of structure. I was just using some cardboard aided design to help to work out what the front former, which will be the back of the radiator section on my cycle cart, and it'll also be the front of the bonnet, what that should look like, and with some references of different pictures of the Delages on Google. This is the shape I came up with. You can see it's drawn on there. I measured all of that out, and then I've just cut that out of some plywood using a jigsaw, and I just need to finish shaping. I need to soften up the edge, finish off these corners because they're a little bit lumpy, but then I will be able to bend another piece of metal like how I've done with this one to fit this front former in place, and you can see what the body will start to look like as it has that rounded former at the dashboard, which will then quite quickly before the bonnet turn into a point, but a very shallow point, and then that follows down the bonnet to this, which will be the back of the radiator, this former, and then the radiator will come out about this far, and then it has an angled front face, and it looks quite short, but because it comes down here and that radiator will come all the way down to here, I think it will look good, and it'll end up being a sort of a square with a little bit of a pyramided top, and I think it'll look really good. I've now got the front former attached so that it is parallel to that former. We decided that we were just going to bolt it through instead of doing that mechanism, because it needed to be on the inside, because the bodywork, as it comes out and it continues in a straight line, it will be flush on the inside of the rails here, but the outside back there. So if we did the same thing with the angle iron, then it would be showing outside the bodywork, so we thought this was a much neater way of doing it. The only issue we had was that when we started drilling and drilled some pilot holes, the angle was wrong. It was just out, so when drilling the larger holes for the M6 bolts, we drilled at an angle and then straightened it up, which then meant it was moved slightly over, but only on the bottom ones, which then turned the angle back, and it is perfect. The next thing to do is to work out what shape and size the former that's going in here is. It is similar to this, but the top will be very slightly lower, and it has a bit more of a point like this front one does. So it's not quite as sharp, but it's a slightly more rounded version of this. So it'll be a sort of somewhere in between them, and it will sit about here. I screwed the chuck for this former into the former through some holes which will later be rivet holes for bodywork, and then using a rather interesting jig, I have spaced this board out so that it is parallel to this. So I now have two boards which are parallel to each other, and this is in the position of the second former. And to get the correct shape on it, I'm cutting slots. So I've cutted one slot in here, and I ran a bit of string from the centre of this board to the centre of that former, and with this piece of string I could then put it in the slot, and the height that it rested at was the height that I wanted. So I've marked that out on there. I'm marking out the bottom of where the curves are, because that is another sort of important part for where the shape is. So this can all be a nice flat part, and then all the curves are up here. And then I've marked there, and then I need to cut some more slots throughout, and then that will create my shape, and I can then use that to bend the metal to create the former. And like that, I suddenly have my middle former. I'm quite happy with the shape of it. Putting string across, there's about a 3mm gap all the way around, which is perfect. Means that when the steel is bent on it, the steel should be the correct size. No further sanding or anything is needed. It's about a couple of hours work, and I'm pretty happy with it. Tomorrow I can bend the steel, and then my formers will be shaped. The steel is now shaped around the former, and the next thing to do is I need to mark out the bottom of there, and then that cut angle. It's not 90 degrees, that it's 85 degrees or 95 degrees depending which way you look at it, so that the former is vertical to the road, not to the rails, because the rails are at a 5-degree incline. And then it is time to weld it on, and then the three formers are shaped. I've now got the last former welded on, and I'm really happy with how this is looking. They still need the bracing, which will go in the edges on all three of them, and then these two will also be joined by whatever steering mechanism we use. But I'm liking how this is looking. I just chucked the wheels on quickly so I could see what it would look like. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.